is Landon Bogard, and I've been here with JourneyTEAM for going on about 4 years. This is the first session of our Business Technology Summit for 2021. Appreciate everyone joining. This is we're going on year 9, I believe, for this Business Technology Summit. So appreciate those who've been with us for that time, and any folks that are new, and looking forward to having you guys here. We are joined today with Jim Hill. He is one of our senior architects on our Power BI team, and is absolutely fantastic at what he does. I imagine some of the folks on the line have had the pleasure and experience of working with him on projects in the past. If you have not, then excited for you to get to know him and have you listen to the session he's got prepared today. He's put a bunch of time and effort into it, and excited to hear it myself. Just a few disclaimers for everyone. So again, the session is being recorded. By default, everyone is muted. So if you guys have questions, then we like to make this interactive. So I'll be on this entire session, and if you have questions, don't be shy. Feel free to pop in the chat and ask away, and I'll very kindly interrupt Jim throughout the session and let you guys get your questions answered. So please feel free to do that along the way. And then if you have any just connection issues, please use the chat. You're welcome to reach out that way. Probably the best way to get help with any connection problems is reaching out to our support department, and that's just at the very bottom of this list here. It's journeyteam.com/BTS support, and we've got people on standby, ready and willing to help ASAP. So the other thing I'll throw out there is we've got a big giveaway for this year's BTS sessions. So all the attendees, anytime you join a session, there's going to be a survey. If you fill that out, that'll get you an entry into the drawing. We will be giving away one of the new Surface 4 laptops. If you've not seen those, they are sweet, and excited to give that away this year. So that's it for the disclaimers. If you guys are not familiar, I know we have a lot of our past clients on, probably maybe some folks that are working with us currently, and I imagine quite a few that have never worked with us in the past as well. So just so you guys know who we are a business technology consulting firm, and we focus on the Microsoft stack primarily as the technology that we use to implement. About 120 employees strong, 300 plus active customers that we work with on a daily and weekly basis, and been doing this for 27 years, going on 28. So been doing this for a long time. Multiple Partner of the Year awards, 90% referenceable customers, 14 gold and silver competencies across the Microsoft platform, and proud to say we've done at least it changes on a daily basis, but going on 1,300 plus projects in the last 5 or so years. So great place to work, and really appreciate all of our clients that are on, and appreciate you guys joining. One thing I think differentiates us from a lot of Microsoft partners is we're kind of a one throat to choke type of partner, where you can come to us for everything as far as whether it's your Dynamics needs, Power BI needs, Microsoft 365. We really do it all. We have experts and teams across all of the Microsoft solutions, and it's a nice experience to be able to come in and work with maybe Jim on our Power BI team for some reports you need, and say, hey, maybe I've got a need on CRM and some help there, and we can plug you in just to a team member that is on the same team more or less. So kind of a nice differentiator, and some of the technologies we focus on are displayed here on the screen. So I do want to turn the time over to Jim. He's got the exciting portion of that, so I'm going to let him share his screen and introduce himself and get rolling. But just a reminder, again, if you guys have any questions throughout this, please don't be shy. Feel free to reach out in the chat, and I will jump on those questions. So Jim, it's all you, man.
All right. Thanks, Landon. I appreciate it. Well, I'm excited to kick off this Business Technology Summit today. And I'll just want to start out just to give you a little bit of background on me. If I can get the screen to change here for me. There we go. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about telling your business story through visualizations in Microsoft Power BI. So I want to jump right in. It's going to let me. Here we go. All right. So I am a business intelligence and application consultant at JourneyTEAM. I've been with JourneyTEAM for the past 2 years, and I've really enjoyed the time I've spent at JourneyTEAM. My background, I've been in working with data warehousing and business intelligence for over 30 years. My experience goes back into the semiconductor industry, where I helped implement several data warehouses. I also worked in transportation for a period of time, and recently, just before JourneyTEAM, I worked for an e-commerce company that sold contact lenses, where I was the director of data management. So all throughout my career, I've loved to work with data. And today's presentation, we're going to talk about ways that hopefully you can get more out of your data. And I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas. And hopefully the takeaways you'll have will give you the ability to make your reports and dashboards connect better with your clients, with your customers. So just a little bit more about myself. I love sports, pretty much all sports. I love to play softball. That's probably the one sport I actively participate in quite often. And I love the outdoors. So this is a recent picture that I took up in Island Park, Idaho, and got the selfie with my wife and a family of moose. So I love the outdoors and I love outdoor cooking. All right. So we're going to kick off this presentation today by talking about some bad examples. So the first one, each of these examples I pulled right off the internet. And here's a dashboard page somebody built. And you can tell right away that there's all kinds of problems with this. It's difficult to know where to focus your attention. There's lots of color being used, but not very effectively. Your mind has a hard time trying to decide what to look at. And talking about bad use of color or too much confusing of a presentation, here's another dashboard page I pulled off the internet. Way too much content, super hard to know where to even start. Colors all over the place. You know, I know looking at the top it has something with traffic and analysis, but wow, very confusing. And this example I love. Sometimes people get really cutesy with icons to try and represent what's going on. This one's really funny because based on what you're seeing, it looks like the people in Latvia are Amazon giants and the people in India are pygmies. And if you notice, the scale is only from 5 foot to 5'5", but it makes it look like there's a gigantic difference. So it's another really bad example of how to present data. Here's another one that kind of got cutesy. It used a image in the background with these teeth to try and represent bars. Just really poor idea. Because it's skewed, it makes it even worse. And then, of course, there's always the great pie chart. This is actually somebody's real pie chart that tried to show sales by state. And the only thing you can really take away is that California and Texas are pretty big, but it's so hard to tell anything beyond that. And there's so many colors, it's just distracting. So we're going to talk about some things. What I want to start out talking about is what makes a good story. Because really, what we're trying to do is use our data to tell a story to make an impact on business users. So let's get started. Storytelling, what is it? You know, one of the earliest forms of communication is visual art that people created to tell a story, to communicate something. And this has become enduring. We find these pictograms all over the place, especially in the Southwest. They date back to the earliest human existence. And in addition to the visual story, there's also important aspects of telling the story verbally or through text as you explain what's going on in your story. Now let's talk about other aspects of what makes a story good. According to the American Press Institute, a good story is something the audience decides is interesting or important. So you may think it's great, But if your audience doesn't find it interesting or important, your story doesn't connect. So let's start talking about what makes a story actually powerful. The first item is the story can be told simply and quickly. Nobody likes a super drawn out story. They want to understand quickly. The story has to have emotional impact. It has to connect with the audience. So you may be able to present data, but if the audience doesn't feel some sense of impact by what they're seeing, then the story isn't powerful. The story can affect behavioral change. So if these other aspects are there, but it doesn't help affect change or drive change within your organization, then it's probably not powerful. So I like to talk a little bit about some of the stories of some of the best storytellers out there. And the one that I think of first and foremost is Walt Disney when I think of storytellers. Now, there's a lot of things about Walt Disney that stand out in his movies, his theme parks. But one of the things he always talked about was focusing on the details. So get the story complete and but even though we focus on the details, don't let those details distract from the principal message. So that's that main message you're trying to get across. Be detailed, but don't let that distract from what are those principal messages that are important to the people consuming that story. Another really good storyteller is Elon Musk. Now, we know Elon Musk as the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX and several other technology companies. But Elon Musk does a really good job of keeping his stories simple when he's trying to connect with people and explain concepts that can be somewhat complex. He's always careful to make sure his audience can understand what he's teaching. Another really good storyteller is Simon Sinek. Now he's an author, a well-known TED Talk presenter. In one of his books, he talks a lot about the principle of starting with the why. So have a purpose in mind. Know where this story is trying to take you so that you can present your information and it leads your audience to a location that you want to take them. All right, let's break down stories a little bit more. So what are the elements of a good story? First, you have to set the stage. Give the audience something to understand what that upcoming story is going to be. If you don't set the stage well, you're going to waste a lot of time. Second, target your audience. You need to make it personal. It needs to be built to focus on a particular role so they understand from their perspective the things that are important. Next, you need to plan out your story so that it has some structure and meaning and purpose. And then the last part of the elements of a good story is you need to leave room for surprises. And when I talk about surprises, I mean you need to give them the ability to look beyond the first thing that they see to be able to do some exploration. And, a good storyteller sprinkles their main points throughout their story. So these are elements of a good story. I want to talk about each one individually. Start with set the stage. We want to make sure that the audience has some context for the data that they are viewing. This can be accomplished, in several ways. But if they don't immediately understand the context that this report is presented in, they'll spend most of their time just searching to create context for what they're looking at. Back to Walt Disney, in the early movies, quite often Walt Disney started his stories with "Once Upon a Time." He would present the background story of what you're about to learn as you watch the story unfold. And then a little more modern context, as a young boy, I remember watching my first Star Wars movie and being just captured by the words floating across the scene, across the screen. It's kind of interesting. They convey a lot of information pretty quickly in that floating dialogue that starts out the movies. And really, the audience, especially the first Star Wars movie that came out, they had no context for what this space movie was going to be about. So Lucas did a great job of laying out the background, setting the stage for the story that was to come. So some of the ways that we set the stage in our reports, first of all, you need to have good page labels. Those page labels need to be clear and understandable by whoever your audience is going to be. And even it helps if those labels are things that even a person not affiliated with that part of the organization could probably understand. Have clear titles. Each of your visualizations should have a little context at the top to help them understand what that visual represents. Be careful in highlighting key metrics. You want to have those things that are most important kind of jump off the page and draw the attention of the person that's seeing the report. Highlighting is a really nice way to be able to do that. Limit the use of your colors. You can put too much color on a page to where it draws it doesn't focus the attention of the audience in any way. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the presentation, but often we like to use comparisons and then use a color that highlights the highs and lows so that they can quickly see the important pieces of information on the page. Use good spacing. Be careful not to crowd too much stuff on a page. It's okay to break things into multiple pages. It doesn't all have to be on a single page. Use, as I mentioned, as few visuals on a page as you can so that you can tell the story without overwhelming the person that's looking at that reporter dashboard. Okay, let's move on to elements of a good story. The second part, targeting your audience. You need to, right from the beginning, understand who you're going to be communicating to and what are those key elements that that person wants to see. A CEO may want to see something very different than say an inventory manager, where the financial implications may be important to the senior executives, but really the details of product availability would be more important to the inventory manager. So understand who your audience is and make sure you know what are those key things that they want to see. And then create a different page for each different user group. It's also a good idea to plan out your story. Don't be afraid to use a whiteboard. Create a storyboard of those key elements that you want to see. This can be right up on a whiteboard. You can do it through a graphic tool to lay out what are those key elements that are important to your audiences. And focus on the most important stories. Don't get too distracted in everything that's possible, but put the things in that are the most important to your audience. And plan multiple pages so that you don't distract from the main points on each page. I like to think about report building as journalism. So when I was in high school, I was on a high school newspaper staff, and they taught us the importance of asking the right questions. And this is true of the reports you're building as well. Who's going to consume it? What areas are important to be able to see? These may be geographic areas, they may be different parts of the business. Where do you want to group the data? What time frame is important? When is this information most important? Does the business look at things on a weekly basis? So they want to see how this week compares to the prior week or the same week in the prior year. Also, the what. What are those key measures? Is it revenue? Is it customer counts? Is it visits? Whatever those key measures are of how your business is doing, those are the what. And then the how, how does that impact things? Think about how the numbers that you're presenting are going to be used and how is the best way to present those. So act like a journalist as you go in and work with your business community. And then finally, think about the whys when planning additional pages. If you build a report or dashboard page that has high-level numbers on how the business is performing, and even you compare those to past periods, the immediate question is going to be, why is this happening? So you need to think about building additional pages to let people explore the why. Why is sales down in a particular region? Is it particular products that are adding to the low sales? You need to think through how are the typical ways people will want to explore the whys. And this leads really well into leaving room for surprise. You start at a high level, and then you want to enable exploration through a few things. Filters, different types of interactions between the visuals. Power BI has a really nice default way that when you put more than one visual on a page, when you highlight or select a particular bar or element in that chart, it will do either filter or cross highlight on the other objects on the page. It gives somebody the ability to interact with the data, better understand what's happening. You also have the ability to drill through and drill down. So for example, if I have a particular report page, I can basically right click on one of the elements, choose drill through to another page, and it'll open up that other page filtered to the context that I started from. This is a really nice way to plan out that ability to understand better what's going on with the data, and it leaves that room for surprise and discovery. Another thing you may want to consider is Power BI has the capability to group several visualizations from one or more reports on a single page. That gives a high-level view of how the business is performing. And then if you click on any one of those individual visualizations, it will open up the page that visualization came from. And that gives executives a really good way to drill to and see some more detail to what's on those high-level KPI dashboards. All right. In order to better understand how to go about building dashboards and report pages so that they have impact on your audience, it really helps to have an understanding of some basic science behind data visualization. Now, I'm not a cognitive scientist. I'm a business intelligence analyst and professional. But these principles can help you think about what you can do to make your reports better and more meaningful for your audience. So I want to start out with, to build really great visualizations, you need to understand a little bit about how the brain works. Visual memory accounts for 70% of all the sensors in the brain. And we all know that, our mind gets triggered by the things that we see, but it also has lasting persistence. And we're going to talk about how do we capture people's attention and take it all the way through to actionable insights. So there's 3 parts of visual memory: iconic memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about each one of those. All right, so we're going to start out with iconic memory. So iconic memory is that part of our brain that takes in the whole field of view of all the things that are around us. It takes in all that information, and then that in iconic memory, it only lasts for a fraction of a second. But the things that our mind perceives as potentially important are the things that we focus on. And 99% of the information that we see gets discarded, and only those few things that trigger our iconic memory stay with us. Marketers take advantage of this all the time. So only the interesting data is passed through to short-term memory. And as I mentioned, marketers take advantage of it all the time. So for example, everybody knows what this icon is, right? Many of you have phones that are from Apple or laptops. We all recognize Nike Swoop. This all makes us think about the packages that are on their way, hopefully, or on our porch. And we recognize this logo as a Twitter logo. And then since I'm from Utah, I also threw in just, hopefully you recognize the Utah Jazz logo. Okay, so iconic memory, think about icons that prompt you to start that thought process. And the things that are most interesting will go into short-term memory. So this is a good example is you're driving down the freeway, you see a billboard, you're driving by tons of billboards as you go down the freeway. But the only ones that really capture your attention are ones that may be interesting to you or catch your attention. Then you want to pass through to your short-term memory and decide what to do with it. All right, so, excuse me. Iconic memory can be muted by a lot of things. So in this example, you can see there's a lot of things that distract. Bright colors all over the place. You're really not sure where, based on the colors, where to start looking. Thick borders that are all over the report, grid lines. You can have a line chart or a bar chart that has background grid lines that actually distract from what you're trying to communicate. Too much precision with numbers can distract, especially if you have a table of numbers. Having too much precision, out to the pennies in a multi-million-dollar report can be distracting. And also no highlighting can also cause stuff to not go into iconic memory. And then in this example, you can see there's a misalignment between these three charts in the middle. Misalignments can distract from what we're trying to convey and get the person to focus on. Okay, short-term memory. So how does stuff pass from iconic memory into short-term memory? It only lasts for a few seconds, and our minds only can grasp, most people, about 3 to 5 pieces of information. So we want to be careful to not overload our reports with too many visuals. And memory tries to form these 3 to 5 pieces into patterns that it can detect in the page and in the data that's supporting that page. And finally, if these pieces of information don't have a story to tell, it's not long-term memory. Help tell the story that the person needs to take action on. So I want to talk now about a principle that is called Gestalt. It's a German word which means shape or form. And some German scientists back in the 20s, I believe, used these principles to talk about how we connect with visual things. So this first example shows some, elements, and right away your mind starts trying to create connections. So, there are gray boxes and green boxes, and your mind is starting to say already, well, the green things are probably related and the gray things are probably related. That's just how our mind works. Also, proximity does the same thing. So this group on the left looks like everything's the same, but then you have these 3 columns that look like they're probably related to one another. And using some of this white space can help reinforce the point that these things are related or correlated. Another principle is continuity. This one's kind of a dichotomy because You have the straight line, which shows orientation, and then you have the red dots versus the gray dots. So there's kind of two different things going on here at the same time. That might be confusing for your audience. As I mentioned, it is okay to use white space effectively too. With Gestalt principles, there's these pictures that the negative space is actually used to communicate something. So for a long time, I never even noticed that the logo for FedEx had a little arrow in the middle of it. It's really obvious once I recognized it, but it kind of gives the impression that they're going to move the packages on. They're going to get it somewhere. The very clever use of negative space. And then this is just a fun example before that shows the tree in the foreground and some animals in the background. Kind of a creative image. So these Gestalt principles can be applied for us too. Proximity and similarity. And we showed one of those Gestalt principles was things that are grouped together or in proximity help better convey the information that we're trying to show. So in this case, I really like the visual. I could have just had a bar chart that had all the states in alphabetical order. But this gives me a really super fast way for my mind to say, oh, wow, we're killing it in Illinois and Ohio and Michigan and not doing very well in these 3 or 4, 5 states on the end. Thinking about how we present those can focus the attention where it needs to be so people can get that information in their short-term memory and hopefully drive it into the long-term memory. Other principles that our mind uses to recognize things, continuity. Line charts do a great job of this. Our mind really can understand a line chart and understand how things are trending and can quickly identify where there's highs and lows. This isn't the greatest example, but the principle of continuity that a line chart provides is an important principle to take advantage of. Another Gestalt principle, figure and ground. This was an example that uses that background space really effectively. It shows that these dots in the top are defense scores and the ones in the bottom are offense scores. And then they have navigation icons to let you compare one team to another. Sometimes you can combine things, enclosure and symmetry. In this case, they gave an example of a really complex slicer panel that they put an area around to separate it from the actual data. So enclosing using background shading or boundary lines can help, but you want to use it cautiously that you don't draw attention away from the key measures. And then you can combine continuity and symmetry. This is a Power BI dashboard page, and each one of these little visuals represents a pinned item that if you click on it will take you to the full report. And they organized it horizontally on things like month-to-date numbers, month-over-month numbers, week-over-week numbers, and then the business areas as the columns. It's kind of a clever dashboard. Once your mind kind of wraps around, this gives you a very quick way to compare different parts of the business all in one view. But it is very busy. All right, let's talk about the long-term memory. So obviously lasts for a long time. That didn't take a lot of science to figure that out. Long-term memory lasts long. And data needs to transfer into your long-term memory to increase the possibility that it'll support your decision making. So you want it to, that short-term memory items that you focus on will go into long-term memory and help support your decision making. So things that support long-term memory, have a clear call to action. So within your data, you need to have visual representation that really shows where the key issues or opportunities lie. Use those Gestalt principles to create data patterns, to group similar metrics together. Perhaps it's by individuals or by region or by manager versus individual contributor, whatever those things may be that'll help a person quickly relate to that arrangement. And use some of these precognitive techniques we've talked about, proximity, continuity, to spark interest in your reports. And then it always helps to have text to help connect the dots in what you're presenting in your reports. These can be text boxes. Sometimes it's just labels. But have that text there. And then as you're in meetings, it's okay to use your dialogue to help reinforce what they're seeing on the report pages. All right. So I've organized, there are tons of principles that make reports great. And I've organized it into 5 categories, and I call these gauges of great reports. So I'm going to walk through what makes reports really great. We'll talk a little bit about some of the principles we've already discussed. 5 gauges to a great report. Is it targeted? Is it beautiful? So is it aesthetically pleasing? Is it focused? So does it have content that focuses their attention? Is it simple? So not overly crowded or overly stuffed with visuals. And finally, is it organized? So is it organized in a way that's easy to understand what's related to, what visuals are related to one another? The way that I like to look at this, and you can use this on your existing reports or on reports you're building from scratch. So ask these questions. For targeted, is the report built for an audience? Beautiful. Is the report appealing? Have you applied your corporate colors, your organizational branding, so that the people are comfortable that it relates to your business? You want to be cautious with the colors you use, because the human mind focuses on certain colors. We've been predisposed to interpret things like red as being bad and green as being good. I think that comes from stoplighting. But be careful, even if your organization's primary color is red or green, be careful in how much you use it in the report, so you can still use that precognitive ability to know that something is good or bad by using those colors judiciously. Other questions: is the report distraction free? Is the report easy to understand? Is the report designed with all of these cognitive recognition principles in mind? As you organize the page, are you laying it out in a way that you can focus the attention in the right places? Okay, so let's start out with targeted. You want to make sure that you've identified your audience. Who's going to be consuming this? That you find their most important measures, and you make sure those are prominently used in the layout. Understand key groupings. It could be the when stuff happens. It could be the where, geographic groupings. Think through understanding how things should be grouped. And then ask the next question. Well, if a number shows something, why is that happening? How do I drill through to the next important thing? So I'm going to give an example, a success story. And we had a CEO of a retailer who wanted to be able every day when they woke up at 3:30 in the morning and look on their phone to see how his stores were performing. The problem, the Power BI report that was built for them was built by the finance team and included every time slice available across time. So month to date, week to date, quarter to date, year to date. They had 3 or 4 numbers for each of those, and it was a super wide report. And then they had rows for every single store. So if you think about it, this isn't the exact report, but it had an office, a region, and then all of these numbers, and it scrolled on for a long time. But when the CEO brought it up on his phone, it meant that he had to do a ton of scrolling, and it was really hard to get to the heart of what was happening. Plus, there was no highlighting. So none of the data was highlighted, so it didn't focus in on where the problems were. And as a result, he was really frustrated trying to scroll and navigate, figure out what was happening in his business. It was pretty much unusable on his phone. So the solution, we created new measures and included the differences, the percent difference from before and after. This gave him the ability to see exactly which stores were having an issue, either positive or negative. And we built new report pages used in color to highlight those differences. So this isn't exactly the report, but it's similar. So we highlighted the highs and organized it so we could quickly see who were the top ones. We also added time period buttons so that he could look at week to date, quarter to date. He could even look at the last day. That way he could quickly see who did well yesterday. He could jump to the weekly view as well. And then we added a really easy to use drill through experience. So if he was looking at this report and he wanted to see what East Fultonham, Ohio was doing, he could select East Fultonham and then see location details that would show him the details of what products were selling and which products were not. Then we organized the page in a really easy to use mobile layout so he could easily navigate around the page and see just exactly what he needed to without having to scroll through a ton of numbers. All right, the next gauge I want to talk about is beautiful. Is it appealing? We want to effectively use the organization logo. We can do this with Power BI. It makes it really easy to put it in the background of your pages. We want a background that complements the organization colors, but it doesn't distract from the visuals. So keep it simple, keep it relatively small so it doesn't take up too much of your valuable real estate. And you want to use a color palette that uses your organization colors as well as complementary colors. And then if you have a really bright, as I mentioned earlier, primary color, you may want to still have it in the palette, but not the principal color that's used in the report. You also want to make sure that you test your color palette to make sure it works well for the color. Look at particular pages and see how the color palette works for people with typical colorblind issues. And then make sure you use a font that scales appropriately so it still looks good on smaller data elements, axes, etc., as well as works well on titles and labels. All right, let's talk focused, the focus gauge. Is the report distraction free? Does it avoid too much color? Do you choose the right colors to focus attention? It's important you choose the right visuals also. You know, a lot of people like to use pie charts, but if it has more than just a few values, it can be really hard to trigger that short-term memory when you're having a hard time understanding how big those things are. Use grid lines and borders sparingly, and avoid slicer sprawl. These are the filters that can be put on the page. You don't want to overwhelm your page with too many slicers. All right, so choose the right visualization. So this is the example of a donut chart. It's just like a pie chart, only it has a hole in the middle. The challenge with this is sometimes it's really hard to tell which of these things are bigger. Is SMO bigger than search? You know, they both ran to about 2 million. Is SEM bigger than one of those two? You know, it's really hard. And even on some of these smaller slices, which of these are bigger? I typically try to use bar charts instead of pie charts, because the mind very quickly picks up those similarities and those differences. So you can see this a lot easier to see. Yep, search is my top, and then SMO, and then SEM. So encourage you to only use pie charts or donut charts in very selected ways when you only have 2 to 4 items that you can show on that chart. And then make sure your labels not only include the value, but also the percentage, so that they get that reinforcement as they look at it. Use grid lines and borders sparingly. You can see what a difference this makes. Let me go back to the previous. Here's a chart that I pulled right off the internet, and you can see how distracting all of those lines are, as well as this is a really short range of values, and you really don't need that y-axis because you have the numbers displayed. So this is a lot better visualization, and your mind doesn't get distracted by all those other things. Another good thing you could do is we could have sorted this so you had tables first, so you don't have to look back and forth to compare things. So you may have sorted it by its value. It would have been a better improvement. Also, use data labels instead of axis labels. That's much easier for people to look at and understand immediately. All right, looking at my time, got a few more minutes. I want to try and get through these last few slides. Talk about another success story of Focused. This is an example of a business where the CMO couldn't understand how the sales pipeline was performing. He had some existing Power BI reports, which are over here on the right, but there were a lot of challenges, a lot of problems. The dashboard was difficult to understand. The colors were there without much purpose, and some of the visualizations really didn't provide any insights. Like this one that is a clustered column chart, estimated close date over here on the right. It's really hard to interpret anything from that. There were too many slicers, all these slicers on the left, plus some slicers on this top report, and they weren't in a very good place. And mixed visualizations were causing lots of confusion. And then in addition to all of those things, there were also measures that were flat out not correct. So what the solution was to reorganize and simplify the page with roles in mind. So we created multiple pages. So this was one page that showed the numbers. These numbers in green are revenue. The numbers over on the right in blue are counts of opportunities. Different roles by director and by rep. And we moved the unnecessary slicers off the page and move the others over in this far right side to try and focus more attention on the most important metrics. And then we got rid of all those meaningless colors and gave some purpose to the colors that we kept. All right. Then we also highlighted, like in this bottom right chart, who those leaders were in each situation. So who had the most lost, who had the most won opportunities, gave them a quick way to see where they might need to focus attention. All right, keeping it simple. Avoid too much content in a single page. That's always a killer. Remove unnecessary titles and labels. Use data labels and remove access labels when feasible. Shorten the length and numbers to make it more readable. You don't need, if you're 12.5 million, you don't need all the way down to the units level. So consider that. And also think about how this report could be accessed and used on a mobile device. All right, so here's some other examples. You want to use comparisons to enhance understanding. Just a table of numbers is nice, but it really doesn't highlight what's going on. Here's a better example that Power BI really helps with. You can see that by state, you can see year over year sales, and the ones that are down, and the ones that are up, like California's up 3.4, Illinois is up 5.5, but Indiana's down 11.8%. This gives somebody a quick way to highlight or to zoom in on what's important, where the business impact is happening. Organized, okay? Place the most important content in the top left of your page. So we'll show you an example in a second of that. Group common visuals together. Make sure the visuals are aligned. Don't have choppy layout that distracts. Don't overload a page. Less is usually more. And then use consistent fonts, styles, colors, borders, and shading so that page to page there's some consistency. Use the same color for given dimensions across visuals. So you can see on the one report I used opportunity in one color and revenue in another color. All right. In the Western society, we're taught from a very young age to read top to bottom, left to right. That's so well ingrained in us that when you're building a page, you should think about that cognitive principle. And as you lay out your page, your most important information should be in the top left. Then if there is something center page, the second most important information should be there, but it's not always used. And then third most, fourth most, and then finally, the least important information should be in the bottom right. Then when somebody comes to the page, the first thing they're going to look at is that top left position. So ask the question of your report audience, what's the most important information we need to communicate? And then focus it up in this top left corner. One more business case here. We had a CEO of a HVAC business come to us and ask for a better way to understand how he was allocating his resources. His existing report was looked like this, really confusing. There's a whole bunch of numbers in the bottom right. None of the colors mean anything. These highlighted yellows are really not meaningful, and the columns didn't align. So existing approach showed hours by specialty area, but it was super difficult to understand. The date headings didn't align, the colors weren't meaningful. The data regarding staffing levels applied outside the report. So he would take these numbers and then have to look at how many people did I have so I knew where I was over or under allocated. So solution, we build a model with data from that same source. We added staffing counts from their HR system. We added calendar table to align with his business timeframes. And we built reports with visuals that highlighted the staffing levels, both high and low. So this chart in the top breaks it down by pipe fitters, plumbers, and sheet metal workers. And the ones that are highlighted in green have the staffing levels right for those weeks. The ones in yellow are a little bit high or a little bit low, and the ones in red are really high or really low. And these three visuals in the middle show them by those categories where their problems are high or low. So it gives them a really quick way to see where do I need to adjust my staffing levels to meet my needs. All right, we're almost to the end here. Let's talk a little bit about what Power BI does to help you tell your business story. And first of all, Power BI has a rich library of visualizations, all kinds of charts and graphs and images that you can manipulate to tell the story you want. It comes with a default of about 16 to 20, but there's a whole library of additional things you can download and use. Easy to customize your branding, to add backgrounds and a custom color palette that can make your charts and graphs look great and match your corporate colors. Simple to apply conditional formatting. So it'll let you create those comparisons and do highlighting so that a large chart of numbers can quickly focus the individual on the things that are the most important. It also supports an extensive language called DAX, which lets you create those comparisons through measures and calculated columns. It has a really rich time intelligence so that you can create comparison to one period to another period. And it also has that really useful interactions between visuals. So an individual can click on a bar or a number and see the other visuals filter to respect what you're exploring. And it also has a really easy way to align your visuals on a page and also create layering so you can layer one visual on top of another to provide more context and more detail. And then last of all, it has drill through capability where you can connect one page to another, and it allows you to create buttons to help with navigation or create bookmarks to create really dynamic pages that can show exactly what you're interested in. All right, next steps. I hope that you'll take these questions and these 5 gauges and apply it to how you're letting data tell your story, whether that's an existing report or something new. Apply cognitive principles as you build out new reports. Think about how the mind works to interact with those visuals. And our team also teaches courses that go into much more detail on the fundamentals of visualization. You can reach out to us to try and schedule. We have a whole bunch of classes, not just on visualization, but on Power BI basics all the way up to advanced DAX and a whole variety of classes. And also, we've recently created a thing called JourneyTEAM University for online self-guided training. You can pay for specific classes, and a class on visualization that goes in more detail will be up and running within the month. So you can reach out to us and we'll give you more information on those things. And then, of course, we are available. We love to help people use Power BI more effectively. So if you need help on making your reports more impactful, bringing your data together to tell a better story, we'd love to talk to you more about that. All right, I've made it to the end of my presentation. We have a few more minutes if there's some questions. Landon, do we have any questions that came in?
We do. Looks like ranking and ordering is one of the easiest things in Excel. I would love to hear if you have any quick tips on how you've worked around that issue.
So I think what you're saying is when I present a visual, I want to be able to rank it by a particular attribute. So there are ways that you can enhance your data set with specific ordering. So if you want to rank things by a specific value, any column you can specify how the default ranking will happen. There are tricks that you can use as well, where you can enhance your data set to have those specific orders, and you can add them to a visual and actually hide the ranking column so it comes out in the order that you want. So I hope that's what you're asking. Okay, other questions?
Awesome. Looks like I don't see any other questions in the chat. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. We've got a minute or two left, and see if we can stump Jim here. Awesome. I am not seeing any additional questions, so looks like you must have covered everything extremely thoroughly. So well done, Jim.
Well, I appreciate it.
Looks like we might have a question from Nate. Nate, is there a question there? Nate Robinson. Give it a second or two to pop up in chat, but okay. Yeah. So Nate is asking if this presentation is able to be viewed online. Everyone who has registered for this event and has been attending these, you guys will get a PDF version of the slides, and you also get a recording of the presentations here in the next couple of days. So by the end of the week, everyone who's attended these or registered for the BTS sessions should have access to all these recordings. So absolutely. Okay, if there are not any additional questions, just want to say thank you all for joining. Been a great presentation. Thank you, Jim. Just a reminder, I'm going to drop it here in the chat just one more time, but if you fill out this survey, we're giving away a laptop, a Surface Pro 4, and feel free to get that filled out here, just a quick little survey. We're also doing drawings throughout the day. I believe every half hour we're giving away a gift card to different restaurants, things like that. So get that filled out. And appreciate you guys joining. Everyone have a great day and join your other sessions. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Take care.